But it is kind of ironic that Taylor Swift is now hanging out with another friend who's also in a Colleen Hoover movie.
It started with a floral dress, but not just any dress, and not just any woman wearing it. Taylor Swift, radiating confidence and purpose, strolled through New York City beside none other than Dakota Johnson.
So there's the news out there from Taylor Swift's camp. She's been out and about and she has been celebrating because she's got all her masters back. It's been taking her years and she paid like...
The two looked like they were simply celebrating a spring day. But anyone familiar with the simmering undercurrents of Hollywood's latest social shifts knew better. There was meaning stitched into every petal of that fabric. The press, ever vigilant, noticed too. Was it merely a fashion choice or something deeper, something sharper? This is Sophia, and welcome to my channel, Smart Spill. You see, Taylor had a reason to celebrate. After years of struggle, negotiations, and relentless dedication, she finally reclaimed full ownership of her masters. Depending on who you ask, the price tag was somewhere between $360 million and a staggering $1 billion. But this wasn't just about business. For Taylor, this was about power, identity, and artistic autonomy. The kind of triumph that demanded champagne, flashing cameras, and yes, a perfectly chosen outfit. But what really caught people's attention wasn't just the floral print or the victory. It was the fact that the woman celebrating with Taylor wasn't Blake Lively. Instead, it was Dakota Johnson, a longtime friend of Swift's, with a history that spans more than a decade. Their bond wasn't new, but its public prominence now? Very new. Almost symbolic. The choice of Dakota wasn't without its own web of connections. She's currently filming Verity, yet another adaptation of a Colleen Hoover novel. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because Hoover was closely tied to Blake Lively during the It Ends With Us press tour. Lively wore florals in what felt like an endless parade, 25 to 30 variations, all echoing the romantic aesthetic of the film. So when Taylor stepped out in florals alongside Dakota, many wondered, was this a subtle message? A not-so-silent echo that something has shifted? It's not just the public spotting either. Fans noticed that Dakota doesn't follow Blake on Instagram. Another small clue, another breadcrumb. Taylor has long been known for her penchant for subtle messages and hidden Easter eggs. This could easily be another, especially considering whispers from insiders suggest that she and Blake haven't spoken since the drama began. No outreach, no reconciliation. That chapter, it seems, is closed. And the Colleen Hoover connection? That's layered too. After the backlash she received for initially standing by Lively, Hoover wiped her entire Instagram. 2 million followers, just gone overnight. Eventually, she returned, but the silence about It Ends With Us has been deafening. Her retreat from the public conversation speaks volumes, especially now as another Hoover film surfaces, starring Taylor's inner circle. Then there's the wider network of legal entanglements. Remember Tom Brady's rumored departure from Stephanie Jones' PR firm? Katie from Without a Crystal Ball broke that story after receiving intel from a confidential source. It wasn't public yet, the contract hadn't technically ended, but it was enough for Jones to reportedly threaten legal action against Katie. Yet, when Perez Hilton later confirmed the same story through different sources, it gained traction. Both insisted the details were legit. Brady may still be legally tied to Jones' firm, but he's done in spirit. Why does this matter? Because Stephanie Jones is the same PR operative linked to some deeply questionable moves behind the scenes. She allegedly leaked internal communications to Blake Lively's team using another client's phone. That alone casts a long shadow on her credibility and her loyalty. If you were a major celebrity, would you trust someone like that to represent you? And then there's the kicker. Among the voices supporting Blake Lively in her legal saga was an organization that filed an amicus brief on her behalf. But this wasn't just any organization. Digging deeper revealed a startling connection that throws everything into sharper relief, suggesting that Blake's team might not be as transparent as they claim. This insight, uncovered by tireless fans and researchers, has blown open yet another angle in an already complex narrative. From Taylor's floral dress to Dakota's strategic presence, and from a collapsing PR empire to the carefully coordinated legal maneuvers, it's becoming clear that this story isn't just about friendships or fashion. It's about influence, control, and a slow unraveling of the trust that once held certain Hollywood circles together. It all began with a seemingly routine court filing. But beneath the surface, what unfolded was a tangled web of influence, conflicted interests, and quietly strategic alliances. When 3 different advocacy groups submitted amicus briefs in support of Blake Lively, urging the judge to invoke a California statute designed to protect survivors from retaliatory lawsuits, it looked like a strong public stand. They argued that Assembly Bill 933, a law designed to shield victims of sexual harassment and assault who speak out in good faith, applied to Blake's case. But as with much in Hollywood, what appeared noble on paper began to look far more complicated upon closer inspection. Thanks to sharp-eyed investigators and some relentless digging, the uncomfortable truth began to emerge. Angela, a well-informed source, discovered that Ezra Hudson, one of Blake Lively's attorneys and certainly one of the more vocal in the public sphere, sits on the board of one of the organizations that filed in Blake's favor. Another group, the California Employment Lawyers Association, was also part of the push. Not coincidentally, Ezra is reportedly a leading figure in labor law within her firm. No matter how one tries to spin it, the optics are undeniably poor. The suggestion that these filings were driven not by independent support for a broader cause, but by legal insiders nudging sympathetic organizations into action, casts a long shadow on Blake's defense. And even though these connections might not be enough to spark legal consequences, they raise serious ethical concerns. One has to ask, how far are some lawyers willing to go to protect their celebrity clients? At what point does advocacy blur into manipulation of the system? Real survivors, those whose stories these laws were written to protect, risk being overshadowed by such moves. It's no longer just about the court of law. It's about public perception, influence, and how strategy is often disguised as principle. When one viewer reached out to equal rights advocates, a group that also supported Blake, the response they got was telling. The organization claimed they weren't supporting any individual, but rather defending the principle behind the legislation. They likened it to defending speed limits. The law matters, not who's challenging it. But the analogy conveniently dodged the question of whether the claims made by Blake Lively were even true, or whether they had been substantiated with any real evidence. The reply emphasized good faith claims, suggesting that as long as someone believes what they're saying, it should be protected speech. But when reputations are at stake, especially in cases of serious allegations, is belief alone truly enough? The backlash has clearly shaken these advocacy groups. What looked like unified support now seems more like damage control. There's an awkward silence, an impression that some of them may be rethinking their involvement. And while public statements maintain the legal rationale, the damage to credibility is already done. Meanwhile, Blake Lively has attempted to pivot toward positivity, celebrating her lifestyle brand's supposed success. But even that narrative is cracking. Videos surfaced on TikTok showing racks of her Blake Brown beauty products at Target, all marked down by 80%. What she promoted as a sold-out triumph was in reality a quiet liquidation. Target, once seemingly enthusiastic about the partnership, has reportedly stopped talking about the brand altogether. A failed launch blamed in part on the timing of her lawsuit and her controversial behavior during the It Ends With Us press tour. That's not the only empire under strain. Betty Buzz and Betty Booze, her beverage ventures, just lost their CEO. Nishad Gupta stepped down in March, and sources suggest it wasn't exactly a peaceful transition. Many believe he saw the writing on the wall and left while there was still time to preserve his professional reputation. It's the kind of move seasoned executives make when a brand is in freefall and they want to disassociate before the bottom drops out completely. And what of Ryan Reynolds? Unlike Blake, his career appears untouched. His industry clout remains strong, bolstered by massive deals, production company successes, and carefully curated public goodwill. For now, he's insulated. But Blake? Without Ryan pulling strings or handing her a role in one of his projects, the path forward looks bleak. Her businesses are failing. Her legal reputation is under intense scrutiny. Her acting career, outside the shadow of her husband, is hanging by a thread. In the end, all of this isn't just about one celebrity's fall from grace. It's a case study in how fame, influence, and the justice system collide. It shows us how public trust is eroded, not with scandalous headlines, but with quiet, calculated decisions that speak volumes. It's a cautionary tale not just for Hollywood, but for anyone watching closely enough to see the truth behind the floral dresses and curated Instagram posts. That truth, what lingers behind every carefully crafted narrative, is where the story finds its sharpest edge. Blake Lively's camp has done everything to present strength, poise, and resilience in the face of mounting scrutiny. But behind the curtain, the illusion is fracturing, revealing a reality shaped less by evidence and integrity, and more by strategic alliances and calculated spin. At the center of it all is a woman once embraced as America's stylish sweetheart, now weathering a storm that seems less about misunderstood intentions and more about accountability finally catching up. When news broke that the advocacy organizations backing Blake had deep ties to her legal team, it didn't just undermine the credibility of her defense. It exposed the ecosystem of protection surrounding her. Ezra Hudson, seated on the board of one such organization, symbolizes how influence quietly permeates the institutions meant to provide impartial support. It's not just optics, it's structural advantage masquerading as grassroots justice. And for the people watching, especially survivors and advocates who count on these laws to protect them, that kind of manipulation stings deeply. But while Blake's legal and public image spirals, another force begins to reassert control: Taylor Swift. Her narrative, though steeped in mystery and symbolism, has always been driven by intention. Stepping out with Dakota Johnson wasn't a random social outing, it was a declaration. Dakota represents not just an old friend, but a figure untainted by the controversy swirling around Blake, and her current role in another Colleen Hoover adaptation? That wasn't lost on anyone. In a single public appearance, Taylor reminded the world exactly where she stands, decisively removed from the chaos, standing alongside clarity, maturity, and trust. Meanwhile, Blake's branding strategies have descended into contradiction. Her celebratory posts about selling out her product lines were rapidly undercut by viral TikToks showing the harsh truth: 80% off clearance signs at Target, empty aisles not from eager buyers, but from damage control. Behind every congratulatory post was a quiet corporate disavowal. And the silence from Target, once a major backer of the Blake Brown line, speaks louder than any official statement ever could. The implosion isn't limited to beauty shelves. Blake's beverage ventures, Betty Buzz and Betty Booze, are now floundering under the weight of association. When CEO Nishad Gupta exited in March, it wasn't billed as a shakeup. It was a soft retreat. Insiders speculate he jumped ship with enough distance to preserve his resume and avoid being tethered to a sinking brand. It's a pattern common in crisis. Those with something left to lose leave early, quietly, and strategically. Ryan Reynolds, meanwhile, continues to occupy a peculiar position in this storm. While his projects remain largely untouched, there's an undeniable tension in how his proximity to Blake is managed. He hasn't publicly defended her, nor has he distanced himself. But in the vacuum of a definitive stance, the silence speaks volumes. He remains a bankable star, insulated by charm, money, and a team that knows how to weather headlines. But the deeper Blake sinks, the harder it will be for him to remain untouched. The irony in all of this is staggering. At the heart of the original defamation lawsuit are accusations that seemed, on the surface, so benign they bordered on absurd, being offended over a compliment about smelling good, for instance. But what unraveled from that single thread is a narrative about power, privilege, and the consequences of unchecked entitlement. In trying to silence dissent, Blake Lively may have permanently stained her own legacy, and perhaps most telling of all is the tone behind the scenes. The investigations, the emails, the DMs sent to advocacy groups, all of it driven not by journalists or corporations, but by concerned individuals, fans, and independent content creators. It's a grassroots reckoning, a collective decision to hold public figures accountable in the age of radical transparency. The comment sections, once filled with admiration and adoration, now pulse with questions, doubt, and justified criticism. When you piece it all together, the strategic distancing, the unraveling partnerships, the corporate betrayals, and the quiet legal pressure, it becomes clear this isn't just a public relations disaster, it's the collapse of a facade. And while Blake may continue to post and perform as if everything remains untouched, the undercurrent is undeniable. Her Hollywood chapter, at least as the industry once knew her, is ending. And it didn't take a scandal in the traditional sense. No criminal charges, no explosive expose. It took people paying attention, people who read between the lines, people who remembered that behind every influencer gloss and curated red carpet moment, there's a story that often never gets told. Until now. And that's what we're here for. There's something haunting about the slow disintegration of a public persona, how fame doesn't always collapse in a single moment, but in 1,000 silent cracks that spread until the whole image gives way. Blake Lively's journey from red carpet icon to central figure in a legal and cultural controversy is one such story. It didn't begin with outrage or scandal. It began with entitlement disguised as outrage, wrapped in privilege, and defended with the full force of Hollywood's quiet machinery. But the machinery is faltering. Take, for instance, the curious decision to sue over what many would consider an innocuous compliment. The lawsuit, filed against Justin Baldoni, is grounded in the claim that a casual remark, one suggesting that Blake smelled good, was somehow defamatory. That detail alone sounds almost laughable until you look at how it was used as a cornerstone to launch a retaliatory legal strike. It wasn't about the comment. It was about control, about weaponizing legal infrastructure to punish dissent, however minor, and suppress voices that didn't conform to her narrative. In doing so, Blake has inadvertently become a case study in how not to handle public backlash. Instead of addressing criticism with humility or transparency, her team responded with aggressive litigation and curated PR counter-narratives. But the public is no longer as pliable as it once was. Gone are the days when celebrity statements were accepted without scrutiny. In the post-Me Too, post-Time's Up era, people expect substance. They demand evidence. And when the stories don't add up, they begin asking questions. The unraveling has reached even Blake's commercial endeavors. The downfall of Blake Brown, the Target exclusive lifestyle brand she championed, didn't happen because of bad design or marketing. It happened because controversy has a cost. After TikToks revealed the mass clearance of her products, the facade of success shattered. And yet, instead of acknowledging the situation with sincerity, Blake chose to double down. She posted sold-out messages positioning failure as triumph, hoping the public wouldn't see the price tags behind the glossy posts. But they did. The exodus of key figures like Nishad Gupta from her beverage brands, Betty Buzz and Betty Booze, only underscores how dire things have become. Gupta didn't make a dramatic exit. There was no press release or public thank you. He simply left, securing another job before the fallout could touch his resume. It's a move that suggests more than fatigue. It suggests loss of faith, that even inside her inner business circle, confidence is eroding. And while Blake struggles to hold on to the remnants of her empire, Taylor Swift is building something very different. The contrast is striking. Taylor's narrative is one of ownership, of her masters, her image, and now her associations. Choosing Dakota Johnson as her visible companion isn't just about friendship, it's about sending a message. Dakota is thoughtful, poised, respected, and her involvement in another Colleen Hoover film, Verity, doesn't feel coincidental. It feels curated. Taylor, known for weaving symbolism into everything from her lyrics to her wardrobe, doesn't do anything by accident. She is, in many ways, everything Blake tried to be, but without the legal baggage and public unraveling. The irony is that the original intent of Assembly Bill 933, the law Blake's team has leaned on so heavily, was to protect people like Taylor. Artists, survivors, whistleblowers. Instead, it's been co-opted into a shield for someone whose allegations haven't held up to public or factual scrutiny. And that matters, because every time the law is misused, its real value erodes. Real survivors, people whose voices need protecting, risk being doubted because someone with influence bent the rules in their favor. Legal experts watching this closely have begun to question the ethics of the defense, even if they stop short of calling it illegal. When lawyers tied to advocacy groups help orchestrate supportive briefs from organizations they're affiliated with, it may not be a technical violation, but it undermines trust. And trust is the currency of advocacy. Once lost, it's almost impossible to earn back. What's left now is the aftershock. Blake's professional image, once tightly managed, has come undone in real time. She's become less of a brand and more of a cautionary tale. The woman who once dominated the press with style and grace now draws headlines for legal vanishing products and PR desperation. And the industry is watching. Studios, brands, producers, they're making notes. Because in Hollywood, loyalty is often conditional, and reputations are currency. Ryan Reynolds' silence becomes more noticeable by the day. No public defense, no endorsement, no clarification. It's not disloyalty, it's strategy. He's preserving his own narrative, protecting his career and business ventures from being pulled under by association. Whatever support Blake has left is personal, not professional. And in this town, that distinction makes all the difference. So what does this all mean moving forward? It means the era of curated perfection is over. The illusion that fame can shield someone from accountability has finally shattered in a way that even the best PR team can't repair. It means that public trust, once broken, takes more than a statement or sponsorship to rebuild. It means that we are watching a shift in real time, one where justice, integrity, and transparency matter more than brand deals and Instagram aesthetics. Blake Lively's story isn't over, but the version that was once so carefully constructed, the stylish star, the beloved brand ambassador, the Hollywood insider, is. What remains is a woman in the middle of a reckoning she never saw coming, surrounded by the fallout of choices made not just by her, but by those she trusted to protect her. And perhaps that's the most powerful message of all, that in an age of constant exposure, the truth has a way of rising, no matter how deep it's buried.